All right, next up, the conversion law in Victoria takes effect. This is another tough one. Don't worry, there's light at the end of the tunnel. The subject of conversion therapy actually has come up again, I've noticed, in quite a big way across the globe, and this is because of some developments in America, I think. It coincides, interestingly, with the conversion laws in the state of Victoria, Australia, coming into effect. Now, you know that legislation passed a while ago, and I covered it at the time in detail, but they are now in operation as of February of this year. These are the most draconian laws of their kind anywhere in the world by far. So people in other jurisdictions might like to look at this and see where this goes. And the reason I bring this update is that it does look as though they're going to be enforced very actively and that churches will be targeted. And that is based on the information and the statements being put out by the Human Rights Commission in Victoria. And I don't say that to provoke alarm, and I do it rather to prepare and to inform, because it is true. And we need to know that, and we need to think about it. I believe that a Victorian church leader will be prosecuted before too long under these laws. And it is certainly true that police will knock on the doors of one or two or several Victorian church leaders, and that the Human Rights Commission will investigate and will take action and will come sniffing around certain churches and church leaders. I am sure of that, especially the last one. How long will it take? How many will there be? I don't know, but it will happen. The Victorian Human Rights Commission has published guidance with the enlivening of these laws in the last month, and I'm going to quote you some of it. So this is straight from their documents. Practices that would be considered illegal under the Act include 1. A religious leader meeting one-on-one and pressuring a member of their congregation to suppress and ignore their feelings of same-sex attraction by practicing celibacy. 2. Running a peer-to-peer support group designed to coach a person who is exploring their gender identity to accept the sex they were assigned at birth. 3. A religious leader tells a member of their congregation they will be excommunicated if they continue their same-sex relationship and prohibited from returning as long as that relationship continues. 3 examples given. They add this note. A person may be willing to participate in these practices. However, someone's willingness to participate does not change the unlawfulness of these practices. You might say that's sounding pretty extreme, and it is, but it wouldn't stop there. Those are just 3 examples. There is more. Let me read you some parts of the Act itself. From Section 3, Objects of the Act, quote, to ensure that all people, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, feel welcome and feel valued in Victoria and are able to live authentically and with pride. To denounce and give statutory recognition to the serious harms caused by the change and suppression practices. To affirm that every person's sexual orientation and gender identity is not broken and in need of fixing. To affirm that no sexual orientation or gender identity constitutes a disorder, disease, illness, deficiency, or shortcoming. So they might as well have said, to crush all dissent. Pride, to live authentically with pride, is an incredibly high standard. To feel valued is an incredibly high standard. Deficiency or shortcoming, that's a high standard, not to enable any of those thoughts. Denounce is what you do to a heretic. Section 5, let's jump on. This is the big one. Change or suppression practice means. And note that change or suppression practice is what this Act prohibits. It's not conversion therapy, it's something far more general. It says that this is the thing that is prohibited. Change or suppression practice means conduct directed towards a person, whether with or without the person's consent, on the basis of the person's sexual orientation or gender identity, and for the purpose of changing or suppressing the sexual orientation or gender identity of the person, or inducing, that is encouraging, the person to change or suppress their sexual orientation or gender identity. It then includes a list of specific examples, one of which is, quote, prayer-based practice. I think it's the only act, perhaps in the Western world, where prayer is listed as a possible criminal offence. You see how the Human Rights Commission's examples now fit. Let's take the one of the religious leader in a meeting with a same-sex attracted person. That is conduct directed towards a person, tick. And then it says pressuring, or even if we just say encouraging, which is more likely, pressuring is a little less, encouraging a person to ignore their feelings of same-sex attraction and practice celibacy. Well, is that conduct for the purpose of inducing the person to change or suppress their sexual orientation or gender identity? Under the terms of the Act, it sure is. It sure is. And note, it matters not whether this is voluntary, whether the meeting was requested, whether the question is asked. Let's lower the threshold on another one of those examples. Let's say that we're not talking about excommunication. Let's say something more likely. So I don't know that there's much of what I've described going on anywhere, but let's take, for example, putting somebody out of the worship team or removing them from eldership in the church, some kind of ministry role due to same-sex relationship. Now, that would be perfectly commonplace, I imagine, in many churches because it would not meet the church's requirement for serving in ministry. Is it illegal? I honestly can't see how it would not be. It is conduct directed at a person on the basis of sexual orientation for the purposes of inducing them to suppress or change. At least if asking them not to come back to church qualifies, then I think that it would be likely that this also qualifies, to ask them to step down from this role. It would surely be similar. In fact, here's the interesting thing. You can workshop so many examples in this, and it's alarming where it goes. Encouraging a single straight male to be celibate would theoretically be illegal under the Act, because that is inducing him, a straight male, on the basis of his singleness, it's inducing him to suppress his sexual orientation under the definitions in the Act. It's quite extraordinary. And I haven't even got to what is actually the bigger problem for people at large who aren't people of faith in the state of Victoria. Like, for example, parents who are dealing with a child who's gender dysphoric. The same prohibitions apply to that parent in relation to their child as are applying to a church leader about encouraging somebody to embrace the sex they were born with at birth. I mean, parents, it's just astounding. And then when you get into counselling and medical practice, it applies to everyone, not just churches. It's just that the Human Rights Commission has kind of made it clear they're going to target churches. The Human Rights Commission says that all of these things are going to be illegal under the Act. The question then is, what about preaching? What about teaching? Is it illegal if it touches on matters of sexual orientation and gender identity, if it presents what the Bible teaches about God made them male and female in his image, if it presents what the Bible teaches about Romans 1 saying that, homosexual conduct is shameful and things like this, or that, God's design is that a man should leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife and the two shall become one, and that's the definition of marriage given by Jesus. If you teach these things, what does it mean? Does it mean you're breaking the Act? Well, the Human Rights Commission says no. It says you can say these things that are general in nature or that are spoken to groups. I actually think that the true answer probably isn't no. I think that that's what they're saying at the moment, but I think that under the terms of the law, it might be better to say we don't think so just yet. And they say that the actions are not captured by the law because they are not, quote, directed towards an individual. They would be directed towards a group, or it would be a statement in general to the world at large about theology or the Bible. And I see the point that they're making, but it's important to note that the Act itself does not actually use the word individual. The law, the Act itself, uses the words directed at a person. The question then is, can statements be directed at a person as part of a group of people? Especially in light of these comprehensive objects of the Act, that a person in the group should be able to live authentically and with pride and feel valued and shouldn't be subjected to a view that might sound like their sexual desire is a shortcoming. I'm honestly not confident. Certainly, however, the greatest risk at the present time is in personal and small group settings. It's in the conversations that are had, it's in the counselling sessions that are had, it's in the questions people may ask, the prayer requests people may give. It's small groups, it's personal. It's not congregational settings or statements at large to the world at large at the moment. But I can't see that the law prohibits that from being a problem. With the law coming into effect, the Human Rights Commission has now set up a website, this is great, where people can lodge complaints about people and institutions with a few easy clicks. They are encouraging also historic complaints from the past. The Commission has the power to pursue complaints, investigate complaints, compel the production of documents like sermons and all this kind of stuff, and sanction, to re-educate, to punish, and to suppress organisations and individuals to issue orders about what they can and can't do in the future. A complaint could be made by anyone at all to initiate this, or the Commission can simply act off of a secret and anonymous complaint, and I do mean strictly secret. This is called an own motion investigation, where they can then act off their own initiative to compel the production of documents, to re-educate those who are wrongdoers. They can issue remedies like enforceable undertakings and compliance notices demanding suppression of what you're doing and other such things. They can also sanction an individual or an organisation, and when they do so, can you believe this? The onus of proof is reversed. In other words, they can sanction you, and the onus of proof falls on you to prove that you are innocent. In other words, it's not innocent until proven guilty. You are guilty because the Human Rights Commission said so, and you have to prove to one of the tribunals down there, which is going to be ideologically stacked anyway, that you're innocent. The Human Rights Commissioner Ro Allen, who goes by the pronouns they, them, is currently on record as putting together a team for implementing this scheme. The Commission has been on an education tour, which included visits to churches, and if all fails, there are criminal sanctions available as well, like fines up to $200,000 and prison terms of up to 10 years. That's why I mentioned the police earlier on in this piece. This law is theological, it is hunting for heretics, and it will find them because we are here. There is a great verse in the book of James which calls the word of God the law of liberty. I love that phrase. I'll read it. It says, "For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks intently at his natural face in the mirror. For if he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like, but one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in all his doing." I want to make this point in light of this law and the theology that it seems to teach about the harmful and oppressive and dreadful things that we believe on this stuff. The fact of the matter is, obedience to God is true liberty. That is true freedom. The world tells us that it is in obedience to our own lusts and our own desires and our own feelings that we find freedom. But that is not freedom. None of us are free when we are slaves to the passions of the self. That is a kind of slavery. It is slavery, and it leads to death. The other kind of obedience is obedience to God, and that leads to life, and it leads to liberty of the soul, and it leads to being blessed in all that we do. That is where these people are so tragically wrong. They've searched for freedom in themselves, and in their inability to break free from God's, they've searched for freedom in themselves and their attempt to break free from God's word. They have not found it. And now they're hunting down people like me and churches and pastors who disagree in the belief that it's our fault. And I'm unashamed to say that no, it's not our fault. We've found answers. We've found the perfect law, the law of liberty, and Christ has set us free to follow it. And in closing, let me say this point for people who might be in Victoria or who might find themselves caught by the Victorian laws or who might be pastors or whatever. Times, yes, they are changing, but everything new is actually old. Even the Apostle Paul was hauled before the Roman authorities to give an account of himself and what he taught, and it's been much the same ever since. Let me read you the words of Jesus, who anticipated exactly this sort of thing and far worse from the words that you read here, and gave us some instructions. He says, "Behold, I'm sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Beware of men, for they will deliver you over to courts and flog you in their synagogues, and you will be dragged before governors and kings for my sake, to bear witness before them and the Gentiles. When they deliver you over, do not be anxious about how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of the Father speaking through you. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. A disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for the disciple to be like his teacher and the servant like his master. If they've called the master of the house Beelzebul or Satan, how much more will they malign those of his household?" That's us. "So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. For what I tell you in the dark, say in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim on the housetops. And do not fear those who kill the body and cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both body and soul in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But even the hairs on your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, for you are of more value than many sparrows. So everyone who acknowledges me before men, I will also acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven." As ever, therefore, in the light of those words, the call is to remain bold, remain faithful, confident that the reward is to come, like so many who have gone before us. Indeed, be like Daniel. He read the king's edict. We just read the law. And what did he do? He walked away knowing the penalty, and he lived as if that edict, that law, didn't exist.